All right, boys and girls, we're back here in the shop. It's a Saturday morning, rainy out, and we're going to dig into this M5 again. I just got my new throwout bearing from the BMW dealership. Let's see if I can get you the part number here. So it's a fag bearing. That's who BMW buys their bearings from. And as you can see, the clip on this one puts a little bit of a gap between the collar that the ear hits and the bearing itself. One thing I noticed on this BMW one, the dimple is totally different than the, well, no, I guess it's similar, but different. So this bearing blew the clip out and was compressed. This new bearing as you can see is just a little bit thicker with the shim into it, and my thought and prayer is that with this shim in, hopefully it's going to change the distance and the reading on my PLCD sensor for the slave going in and out. So that's where we're at, and that's what we're going to try next. Alright guys, finally got this thing fixed, and oh boy, I've got a lot to say. So we originally replaced the PLCD sensor and still had faults, still couldn't get it to do the relearns, all that stuff. So I yanked the trans down. We found that the release bearing had failed with not very many kilometers on it. So instead of buying $10,000 worth of clutch parts from BMW to fix this problem, I said I'm going to break it down and I'm going to do it individually, find out what the problem actually was. So I installed the release bearing, put the car back together. To my surprise, when I put the car back together after the new sensor and the new bearing, even though the relearns weren't done every time this car would start, and I could put it in gear now and drive it. So you probably shouldn't drive one of these when the adaptations and relearns aren't done, but I was honestly to the point where I just said, the hell with it. It seems to drive fine and act fine unless it does anything funny, any clunks or bangs, and I'll stop. So I took the car for a drive, probably a 45-minute drive last night. Brought it home, let it sit here in the yard. Literally never done a thing. In the shop with my Creator Elite scan tool, I had numerous times done the bleeding sequences, just because the car had sat around for a long time and it's a high pressure system. So anyway, put the car back together yesterday morning, attempted to do the relearns, they all failed. So then took it for a drive last night, didn't bother trying to do anything when I got home last night. We just went to bed. So today when I get up, I took the car out for another little test drive, and when I got back from my test drive I said, you know what, just for the hell of it, I'm going to try to do this clutch relearn again with my scan tool. So I got the Creator Elite out and I did my clutch relearn attempt, and I noticed something right away. You guys, if you watch my previous video, when I had this car in the hoist and was trying to do the clutch relearn, once I'd start the relearn process, you'd hear squeak, 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 squeak underneath the car. Today, what I noticed when I did the clutch relearn this morning was I didn't have none of that squeaking. It made a little bit of a sound that I could hear. I can't really describe it, but the sound that it made today sounded more pressurized and didn't sound squeaky. And as I watched my scan tool, it then began to go to the second phase of the process, which it never ever got to before. And I said, well, geez, that's strange. Maybe it's working now. And then all of a sudden, boom, a wick come up, clutch adaptation complete. So I started with the clutch adaptation, even though clutch and transmission both needed to be done. I did the clutch adaptation, the first pass, or the first part of the test passed and completed. So then I started the car up with the park brake on, and we did the clutch slipping point relearn, which had also completed that test, which before I never even got to that. So then it come up, clutch position relearn completed. So I no longer have this error on my dash here anymore. I'll just power it up to show you. Whoop. So we've got no transmission or no clutch adaptation failure there. And so what I did after the clutch relearn was I attempted to do the transmission relearn. When I attempted to do the transmission relearn, it would not complete, and it kept telling me longitudinal sensor, longitudinal sensor. So I went into the Creator Elite tool and I went over to the sensor section and I recalibrated the longitudinal sensor and then cleared all the codes on the computer. I tried to do a relearn on the transmission after relearning the longitudinal sensor, and it would not work. So I said, well, what the hell, I've got the clutch relearn done. I didn't have transmission problems before. The transmission problems I created when I tried to do the relearn in the process of all this stuff that went on. So anyway, it wouldn't complete the trans relearn here in the yard. I just jumped in the car, I took it for a quick test drive up and down the road, pulled back in the yard, cleared all my codes on the computer, went back in to do a transmission relearn, and what do you know, it completed and it finished. So the reason I did this the way I did this, guys, is because you might own one of these cars, but you might not have the super deep pocket that the dealerships want and the other places want to service these cars, and the parts can be very overwhelming, and the more you read, the more you get worried. So what I've learned is I don't like to fix it unless it's broken. Now, that being said, I do my maintenance. As soon as there's a sign of anything wrong, I figure it out and I deal with it. But this is a high mileage BMW M5 that's supposedly from Google. The rod bearings go before 200,000. This car's got 220 on it and literally does not burn a drop of oil. I've got a couple minor oil leaks that I'm going to fix up now that I got the transmission issues dealt with, which is going to be very cheap to do myself, and I'll make a video when I do it. But 220,000 kilometers, and did not drive this car for almost a full year because of what went on. And I just recently said, you know what, it's summertime, I'm fed up, I'm fixing this thing, I'm dealing with it. And here we are, it's dealt with and it's fixed. So my theory is, I think from all the time that the car sat with the insurance racket going on and the bodywork and how much time they wasted of mine and all the sitting around, I think maybe somehow it might have lost its bleed. And I believe right from the get-go that it was only the PLCD sensor that was actually troublesome. What I just learned and experienced here today with this car is, even though they tell you not to drive it, if everything feels fine and there's no clunks or bangs or no driveline noises that's scary, if it feels like it drives fine, take it for a drive, warm it up, and try doing your relearns and adaptations again. And all jokes aside, I probably drove this car for well over an hour without those adaptations being done. And I can almost guarantee you, if I was to drop that transmission out again, it didn't cause any crazy excessive wear to anything over the course of doing that. So all I can say is I am so friggin' happy that this thing is back up and working, and that I only replaced the stuff that literally visually was wore out and you could tell that it was wore out. And I'm back to having a trouble-free car, 221,000 on the clock. and we're good to go with no service lights, no transmission or clutch adaptations failing. And literally I documented everything I did to fix this for you guys that own one of these, because there is not much good information to go by. So again, if you've got a funny squeaky sound coming from your car when you try to do the clutch relearn, now that my car has done it and completed it, it does not make that squeaky sound. So whether or not something was a little bit out of place, because I mean, let's face it, a 140-pound transmission, trying to put it in by yourself with a transmission lift, you do kind of got to bump it and wiggle it around a little bit to get it to sit onto the motor. So it really wouldn't surprise me if the release bearing or some of that stuff didn't slightly get jarred on the install, and probably happens to a lot of these on the install. But basically I was going to buy a slave cylinder and a new pivot fork for in the center of the transmission, because I didn't think this was going to clear up. But it's like I said to the wife last night when we drove it, the car is driving absolutely fine and working flawlessly, other than all these lights and ringers going off in the dash of the car. So again, I'm just very, very happy that it's finally fixed, and now I can drive it and enjoy it for the summer. I got brand new tires onto it. We just did the throttle actuators not long ago. We got a brand new Sash's clutch, brand new pilot bearing, new brakes in the front, all new all new EBC pads the whole way around the car, which EBC makes awesome brakes for these things if you want a real aggressive pad that takes a nice bite. The car is looking absolutely great. We've got two brand new headlights in the front of it, right from OEM BMW, $3,000 a piece Canadian. I think my next step is, when we first got the car out, my plasti dip job after 7 years was starting to peel off these wheels. So I took the power washer and I blew the plasti dip off. But I think my next thing is I'm going to put a decent coat of paint and some clear coat on these wheels, and we're going to go probably with a sparkly black, a nice glossy black with some lots of flake into it. And yeah, there will be some videos of this thing driving now too, so be prepared. So happy it's fixed, I can't even describe how good it feels that I accomplished this all myself here at home with this new Creator Elite scan tool, and just my in general mechanical knowledge and tearing stuff apart and putting it back together. I'm glad I trusted myself and went with my gut on this one. So you guys are still watching, I really appreciate it. Please hit that like and subscribe button, help me out a little bit. I just want to throw something else out there. When I took this car for the test drive this morning before the clutch adaptive passed, I know this is going to sound harsh, but I got to throw it in here because it's the absolute truth. Even with the adaptations not completed, I said the hell with it, and I did one launch. So you hold your shifter forward, you let the motor come up 1500 RPM, one bum 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 bum, and I let it launch, and that kind of lets everything bang in the clutch. It's one of your most aggressive clutching maneuvers in this car, and I'm not even joking. After I did that, I literally came home, and after the test drive and that launch, that's what completed. So, not to tell you to go out and beat the snot out of your car when things aren't right, but if things feel right and just something isn't complying and you've done the bleed sequences and nothing's still working, you know, and if you know everything inside the trans is good, like I've replaced all my components and pieces in there, so I know it's good. I just wanted to throw that in there, fellas.